Hello guys, this is Tech Gaming here. So we're gonna have a kind of a bit of a discussion here, and this is something that I've kind of wanted to talk about for some time now. And I don't know. It's an interesting topic. It's something that most new players to Foxhole, they just want to understand what I'm talking about. So let's start with a little introduction here, I guess. So go back a couple of years. So back, I would say, actually technically almost like 3 years ago, back in War 19, back in 2018, December 2018. War 19, if you guys didn't know, was the war that introduced rockets. It had the Jade Cove incident and everything. If you don't know what that is, it is a completely different video, something that I've already covered or so, I guess. And if you wanted to get any details on that, literally look for any person in game who's probably a captain or higher. They were probably around back then or would probably know something about it. But there was something else that war introduced so all those years ago. And that was this vehicle, this awe-inspiring vehicle. This vehicle that surpassed all others. And it was known by many names, but most people know of it as a battle tank. A battle tank is, or it was, I guess, the most powerful vehicle in the game, essentially. It had a complete crew of, I think it was 5. So you would have the typical driver, gunner, commander. But you also had an MG gunner, which was new back then. So it's like the only vehicle that actually had both a MG and a main cannon. But it also had another slot as well, called a engineer slot, in which the engineer could do 2 functions. Mainly, his main focus was to actually reload the gun. The gunner did not reload the gunner mainly fired the gun. So having coordination between the gunner and the engineer was key to the operations of a battle tank. But it also the engineer had the ability to go ahead and repair the tank from inside the actual vehicle. So as long as the engineer had BMATs, you would have a saving grace to get yourself out of a tough situation and stuff. You knew exactly what you were doing. And these factors, along with the fact that it had a 75mm cannon, which was obscenely powerful. So I think the first time I ever had the chance to use a battle tank, which I believe was the first battle tank of the actual game, or the first wooden battle tank. We called it Big Bertha back then. Its 75mm cannon could 1 or 2 shot a enemy light tank, which is insane. It was insane back then. It would be even more insane now, simply because of the fact that vehicles were normally very tanky. I know that they've changed up vehicles quite a bit or so since the launch of light tanks back in the day. Fun fact for some of you new players, there was a time where you didn't even have light tanks. You had a half-track and a field artillery piece, and you had to share the field artillery piece. Yeah, I did a funny there. But it was a very different time, essentially. So the upgrade from a light tank to a battle tank was something really awe-inspiring, because it led to a situation where the ability to actually push the front line could be achieved with a single vehicle if you knew how to use it properly. So, and when BattleTanks came out, I almost exclusively made, actually I think every single video from War 19 was of me in a battle tank. Simply because of the fact that it was, in my opinion, the only means of winning that war. So I think one of the biggest operations I was a part of during the entirety of the war was the operation on, I think, Hotlands. And this was back in the day where we only had a grid of 9 maps. Actually, technically I think we had a total of maybe 12, 13, because instead of having all the maps connected, how it worked back in the early stages of the wars, or so that were released firsthand, or so you would have the 9 maps or so you would have, what is it? I can do this off the top of my head. Let's see. No, I'm not going to try that. So, but you had a total of 9 maps or so in a grid square, 3x3 square. And you had these other maps that were a part of the war, but weren't connected to the main, like, region or so, the main map or so. You could only get there by spawning in to that location. They almost acted like skirmish modes. If you guys ever played the game back in 2017, or like the early beta, where you had like the weekly wars or so, where all the wars, all the battles were on separate maps, and they were all kind of their own independent wars or so. It was very much like that. But essentially, we back in War 19, this was, I think, maybe a week or a couple of days before the Jade Cove incident, we launched a massive attack. And I think this was right when BattleTanks got unlocked for us, because I think we were behind the Colonials back in that war. But we went ahead and we launched this massive attack on Hotlands. And we deployed 5, 7, maybe 10 battle tanks, along with various light tanks, so the logistics to back up all the vehicles. So it was this massive invasion, and we completely stumbled on it by accident or so. And it was kind of a funny story, because what ended up happening was we had redeployed from Westgate. Essentially, Westgate was the bottom left corner of the map back then. We had basically contained the Colonials within their base spawn. So back in the day, instead of having all the regions kind of being open to attack, back then each faction in their home region, or so, which would be the fallback region. So the top regions, the top 3 regions for the Wardens, and then the bottom 3 regions for the Colonials. You would have a home region, essentially, so that would be impenetrable. So all the defenses there would be invincible, and going there was basically suicide. And it was a way for the faction to go ahead and actually make their vehicles and weapons or so and whatnot without being harassed. But we had the Colonials completely contained in Westgate. And in order to secure a victory in War 19, I know a victory in War 19, so that didn't happen for us Wardens. But in our mind back then, we needed to go ahead and secure Hotlands. So we launched a massive attack there. And the way it actually happened was it was very out of the blue. Because I was redeploying because I ended up having a battle tank squadron of 2 battle tanks, a couple of light tanks. And we went all the way to Deadlands. I think we were like chasing after some colonial forces and whatnot, and we ended up in Deadlands, and then we came across battle tank formation, and that battle tank formation was just like, oh, what are you guys up to? Oh, nothing much or so. And it's like, hey, so we're thinking about an operation to go to Hotlands, and it's just like, really? Well, yeah, mind if we tag along? And then as we're kind of getting that organized, we're getting supplies, getting ready for that to happen, another battle tank squadron shows up with another 2 battle tanks or so, and we're just like, here, you guys need to get on this. And then eventually we just had this massive force of people that just happened to all gather in the same spot, and we just launched this massive attack. And it was pretty awe-inspiring to see so many battle tanks, especially since they were new to the game. And since we had a very crack crew, because we had fought in Westgate for a couple of hours or so, we had some pretty good communication, a very good understanding of how the battle tank functioned, so its limitations, its strengths. It was a very nice engagement, to say the least, so it was a pretty fun time. So here, let me backboard a little bit before I just go into a nostalgia trip here. So going back into battle tanks, the topic of today is whether or not they should be returned to the game. because most of you new people are just like, well, what's a battle tank? And so, and after I explain it, it's just like, well, where are they? They were removed from the game, I think. From my understanding, it happened sometime in the spring of 2021. So I believe, I think it happened sometime either during the Winter War update, or so it's like in between the Winter War update and the arms race update or so. And it might not even been in the spring of 2021. It could have been even in the winter or the fall, so I'm not entirely sure. I went through dozens of patch notes or so, and it's not listed anywhere or so, because most of the time they list when things are removed or so. Like, for example, I think they listed that they removed the smoke grenades or so. I found those in patch notes or so. They removed various other items from the game or so that most of you players have no idea what I'm talking about or so. They changed the what is it, the 14.5 millimeter machine guns to 12.5s, which is kind of funny because I think after coming back on for like, when I was off for like a month hiatus, and I was just like, here, load the, what's the 14.5? How do we load the 14.5? And then like Private was just like, what's a 14.5? This uses 50 cal. Just like, what the hell are you talking about? It was just like the most hilarious thing or so, because while I technically was wrong, in my mind I was just like, well, this shouldn't be the case, I guess. So it was a pretty funny situation, to say the least. Excuse the motorcycle in the background. But now going back into BattleTanks, they were removed because of multiple different issues, I guess, with them or so. First off, I guess most people, well, actually, I guess I kind of agree with them that it was, I mean, it wasn't balanced, I guess, to a certain degree or so. Most of the complaints were that it was not balanced and that it was too easy to spam out. And I guess to some degree I kind of understand where people are coming from. For example, if you have a battle tank, and even like during like the mid-era war, I think it was Arms Race, or it was the update beforehand that introduced because here's something else that you guys didn't probably know if you guys are new to the game. There was a time where you had multiple ammo types for vehicles, and in that situation you had I think HE, which is really good against structures. You had armor piercing that was good against vehicles. And then you had shrapnel. And a battle tank with armored piercing rounds could one-shot a light tank, I believe. So it was quite disgusting, but it was a damn good fun time when you were in the battle tank. But obviously, if you're in a light tank and your first experience of the game was you getting one-shotted by a tank that was just better than you, then you're not going to have that fun of a time, essentially. So yeah, so they weren't balanced against light tanks, and then on top of that, so they became easier to produce. Like, for example, when they actually released back in War 19, I mean, I think I had a good amount of free time because I think it was the winter break. Just got out of school and whatnot or so for the semester, and I had the time to just play a YouTube video on my second monitor while I would just grind out the resources for the battle tank. And the battle tanks back then were different than how they were produced before they were removed. So back then they had this completely different system on how you actually went ahead and received vehicles or produced vehicles. Back then you had to go ahead and get a blueprint. Everything came from a blueprint from the factory, so you go ahead and put tech parts into the engineering center, I believe. So, and bear with me, this has been a while ago. I didn't think that I was going to go through all these details, so I might get some of these wrong. I'm going to try my best though. But I believe you'd go ahead and you'd go ahead and get tech pods from component fields, and I think scrap fields as well. You'd get tech pods from both fields, and then you'd have to go ahead and deposit those into the actual engineering centers or so. And back then you could go ahead and research everything, so you didn't have a situation where you could only research one line of vehicle, and you'd have to proceed forward and then loop back around to get the other line of vehicles or the other line of weapons or so. So what would happen is that you would have a branching path. So you could go ahead and unlock one weapon, but you could always go back and unlock the other weapon down the other path or so, and they would just branch outward. And you'd use tech pots to go ahead and do that or so. And when you wanted to make a vehicle, you would have to submit scrap or so, just the basic scrap that you get from a scrap field. Submit it into the actual engineering center to go ahead and get a blueprint of said vehicle. And the blueprints would take a ridiculous amount of time to make. So I think a light tank, while you get 3 light tank blueprints or so, it would take 12 hours. So you could literally, I mean, sometimes I would make my schedule around this, or so I'd be like, okay, so I want to play the light tank, let me put the scrap in the actual engineering center. Let me go do something else for the rest of the day, or sometimes I would even do it at midnight. So then at noon the next day, I could just go ahead and have my 3 light tank blueprints or so. But the thing about it as well is that most people just go ahead and build one light tank, so there's always multiple other blueprints there that you could go ahead and take, because what would happen is that you would submit the blueprint into a vehicle factory, and then it would have all these light tank blueprints that you would have to get. And then back then or so, components were actually not that hard to get. So in fact, there was normally a stockpile of components back in the actual home regions or the home bases, and the biggest shortage in the beginning would be blueprints. But later down, after people exhausted the reserve of components and refined materials, then it would be a situation where you would need to get more components and more refined materials to go ahead and actually make the light tanks. But battle tanks were different. Battle tanks required scrap and I believe multiple tech pods. And tech pods were actually very hard to get, so they were very much RNG, similar to how iron and aluminum work, essentially. So you have to go ahead and get this rare resource to go ahead and get a battle tank blueprint. When you get one, you'd only get one, and it would take an entire day to go ahead and actually get that blueprint or so and whatnot or so. And it would require so many tech pots that I think it would take sometimes 4-5 hours to just grind for it by myself or so. And what I would end up doing is I would go to one of the isolated skirmish regions, and I would just go ahead and just put a YouTube video on or so, something on Netflix. Disney Plus wasn't a thing back then, so I'd just go ahead and have a streaming source going on and watch a video, and I'll just go ahead with my hammer, because I think during War 19, I don't think there were any harvesters. I don't remember. I think that might have been like later on in the game. So I just took my sledgehammer and I just went hammering, got my tech pots, and then I just kind of set up a queue. So when I would take out a battle tank, I would always make sure that I queued up another one. So the next day I would always have one to go ahead and play around with. Because, I mean, one of the things about it is that it was actually, like I said before, it was the most powerful tank out there. And if you were in a light tank, you were screwed if you came across a battle tank. That was just how the game, how the ball rolled, essentially. So, and, I mean, enough talking about nostalgia. So, I mean, going to the battle tank, was it unbalanced? Yes, it was. So I think the ability to repair was a little bit overpowered, but I would say that with the grind that you would have to use to actually get one was quite obscene. So, and the devs have went ahead and tried to balance out the battle tanks multiple times before. Like, even when they went ahead and made it so it was only all mats or so, it still required an insane amount of all mats. I think the last time I checked, it required like 400 all mats to make one, which actually, to be honest, that while it is very expensive, it is definitely, like, thinking about it, like I think a light tank's like 130 or something or so. So it would cost roughly about three maybe a half light tanks. But the thing about it is that the survivability of a battle tank with an experienced team, well equipped, well fueled or so and armed, could wipe out all 3 of those light tanks, no sweat or so. Just banking behind the front line or so, and using various other tactics. So, I guess yes, it was easily spammed out as well. So because of the fact that it was just, there was no reason to go ahead and get any other vehicles, in my opinion, or at least back then. And I mean, the devs also tried to do something else as well, where they tried to make it so, like, those, I don't remember what update it was, but they went ahead and actually made it so, I think, half-tracks, light tanks, and battle tanks could only use petrol, and they made petrol so ridiculously hard to get. So if you ever wanted to RP as Germany at the end of World War II, where you had no fuel whatsoever, essentially just trying to get a tank to the front line, that was the situation for the longest time, and it was not a fun time. In fact, I don't even think I used any light tanks or battle tanks back then, because like, in order to even run one of those, you not only need to have the resources to build one, but you also need to have either a clan or a group that you put together to actually just refuel it to get it to the front line. Getting it to the front line was a hassle. I mean, bear in mind that it was a hassle to get it to the front line even when there was only a 3x3 war map. But this was back, I think before, like in the previous patch map or so, before you had all the new regions where it was like even, I forget what hex it was or so. And you still had to go through like 3 regions sometimes or so. And if you're winning even more to get a battle tank to the front line, which is just insane or so. So to supply the fuel to get it to the front line or so, it was definitely a balancing act, but it just took away from the fun, in my opinion, or so, because I was accustomed to seeing battle tanks in force, seeing huge formations of battle tanks pushing a front line, going up against other battle tanks and whatnot, or so. That was some of the fun of the game, seeing the masses of these forces over here and whatnot. And I mean, I really do miss them to some degree. I mean, so moving aside from that, I guess to address, because like one of the things, because I went to the forums, also the Reddit forums for Foxhole, because I still go there for memes, so it's a very interesting community though, and I would definitely check it out. So if you, I don't know, like to see some things from the community, I guess. So I think one of the fun things about Foxhole is that to interact with the community, you can just play the game, and the community is right there. So, but if you want to see some of the content that people made, like odd or so, memes, some discussions on some items or so, definitely check that area out. But the thing about it is that when I went to the Reddit post and whatnot, so I went through most of the discussions, the biggest complaint, I guess, or so, that kind of solidifies why the battle tank was removed or so, was also the fact that it just made light tanks obsolete or so. Granted, we do have way more vehicles than we had back then. The question is that like a valid reason for getting rid of it? I don't believe so, I guess, in my opinion, just because of the fact that I think that most players, so you imagine you are a player, you have gone ahead and just accumulated, you want to go ahead and make a tank, so, and what tank are you gonna make? Essentially, you can buy the wooden light tank for, I think it's like 130 RMATs, or you could save up another 30 or 40 RMATs and get your faction's equivalent of the assault tank or the cruiser tank or tank destroyer, I guess, which is arguably a much better investment for a ridiculous like 25% more resources, essentially. Like, I think currently, even right now, so in the game or so, if you play right now, so currently, I mean, I looked at the stats, we're not doing well, and I think it's like War 85 right now for the Wardens, but you're not going to see many light tanks out there, so you might see occasional light tanks or scout tanks. but you will primarily only see the spotter. You only see the spotter. You only see the what is it? It starts with a B or so. The Colonial Super Armored Short Barreled Tank or so. I can never remember what its name is until someone yells it in game, and then I'm just like, oh, it's this or so. But you only see that tank. You will. Funnily enough, you don't really see that many silver hands, so I guess maybe I think they just weren't researched this time around. I guess so, because I remember in the previous war, so there was actually quite a bit out there. Actually, not the previous war, but the war before that. I think the war back in I think it was back in September when the update I think Entrenchment released. You saw a lot of you saw quite a bit of silver hands. You saw quite a bit of, but you would only see silver hands. You'd only see outlaws. You would only see the noble widows or so, essentially. So you'd only see these vehicles, and the reason for that is because they are technically the best. So the silver hand has the benefit of having two cannons, essentially, an AT and a 40mm cannon or so. So it has, I mean, theoretically twice the. Actually, depending on what you're hitting, because if you're hitting a tank or so, you technically have a little bit more than twice the firepower of a light tank or so. But when you're attacking structure, so you technically have about, I would say, 75 to 60% more firepower, because the AT gun does do less damage against structures and whatnot. But it's still better than a light tank. You have the Outlaw, which not only has a 5-meter distance advantage of the light tank, but it also has a gun. It's also faster. It has a boost capacity and whatnot. I think it also I'm not sure if it has better armor, so I think it definitely has better structural integrity. I haven't done the numbers on it and whatnot, but it is overall, it has more stats to it, so it is overall a better vehicle. And then you have the Tank Destroyer. Well, it may be slow as hell and consumes a lot of fuel. It is still, I mean, I think a Tank Destroyer, if it penetrates or so, can disable it might be able to disable a light tank in like 2 hits or so, maybe 3. And it mostly ignores most. I'm not entirely sure if it actually ignores most armor, so I have to, because some of the guns are wonky in the game. So like you have it where high velocity cannons, some of them do 40% more damage against armor targets, while others are so. I think like the Sparta has a high velocity. Well, actually no, the Sparta has a high velocity 40mm cannon or so, but it's still not the same as the high velocity field gun or so that the Wardens have. So the stats are different. I think it only has a 20% higher damage, while the Warden field gun has like a 40% or so. So they're not all the same, but it still does way more damage to vehicles or so. And I think even, I'm not entirely sure if the 40% extra damage is also applied to structures as well, because if that's the case or so, and AT, because it's a 68mm cannon on the Noble Widow, I'm wondering if that would make it so it's almost negates the, I guess, the penalty of firing at a structure. I'm not entirely sure, but that's a discussion for another day. But the overall point is that these vehicles are far superior to a light tank, to the point where there's no reason to use it. And this is something that it precedes Foxhole. Like, for example, you will have it where the armored car, well, you have it where the field guns and the armored cars can tangle with each other and whatnot, but the second tank gets come out, the armored cars become useless. And as soon as the first light tanks roll out, the tank gets so useless simply because they don't have the firepower to contend with a light tank, and you just won't see them on the front line unless some, I don't know, some player was very keen on building one, or in a situation where I guess a new player just wanted to buy a tank, thought he could afford it, and just went for it. So you have it where tanks and vehicles in general are always kind of making the previous vehicle obsolete. So in that sense, I don't feel like the battle tank was any different. I think the only difference would be the fact that a battle tank was definitely more powerful than any of the assault tanks that are in the game right now. So, especially if you have a decent crew, I guess. So I can definitely see that. But I still miss them because of the fact that they were actually a very fun time. So seeing a battle tank roll up on your front line is so obviously, hopefully that it's friendly or so, and if it is friendly, then you have a round gain or so. I used to lead assaults with the battle tanks all the time, and it was a fun time. So I guess in conclusion, I would like them to be returned to the game or so. I realized that they might have to be changed to go ahead and make them more balanced, or I mean, you could honestly just put them back into the game as it stands. And I think the only thing that I would probably recommend changing is because I think I listed one thing. Oh, so going into update 47, they're changing the way how vehicle prototypes work. So essentially, you will use iron to I think make prototypes or so. Yeah, so essentially how you used to use iron to go ahead and research vehicles and whatnot. So instead you use iron or so. With enough iron you can make a vehicle prototype, and then I think you make it with a couple of a little bit of scrap. It was not scrap, I think it's like B mats essentially, so like 100 B mats. And then you can go ahead and actually get the prototype or so, and then you can actually repair the prototype. So what I would do, and this is like my recommendation or so, because like there's a lot of different ideas out there. So like I had like the idea of making it so maybe the engineer can't repair the tank or so. Maybe having it where the fuel consumption is a little bit higher. Maybe nerfing some of the turning speed on the battle tanks. But I think the best solution I can think of is to go ahead and make it so the battle tank is always considered a prototype, and making it so it requires a fixed amount of iron to actually just go ahead and get a blueprint to actually build one. And then having it where you just build one or so from like a mass production factory or something like that or so. Or having it where, actually no, I think that would take too much time to go ahead and add it where it actually goes to the inventory of a garage or so. So maybe with existing assets or so and existing resources or so already in the game, just making it so with update 47 releasing or so, making it so it requires iron to actually go ahead and make a blueprint, and then taking that blueprint to a mass production factory to actually go ahead and make the tank. That way, even if you have all the armaments in the world, unless you have enough iron or so, you can't actually make it. Which means two things or so, because one thing, it will mean that you'll see less of them out there or so, kind of keep the same stats or so, but you would also have it where essentially people who are just grinding out iron. I don't know how rare iron is going to be in update 47, but if it is as rare as iron is currently now, what you'll see is a significant increase in people just grinding out resources, not to get necessarily components all the time, but still components and scrap, but to also just get iron. And you might see more resources out there, which in turn would help with logistics to some degree, because then you would have it where more people are going out and actually just gathering resources for the sake of getting one particular niche resource, and will happily go ahead and give those resources to people who actually want them, speeding up logistics and so on, just making an economy that kind of just supports itself to some degree. Because I think the game works very well when people wanting to accomplish one particular task can help others or so in that endeavor. So because it just makes a cascading effect, because then I helped you do this, and then you, with that help, you can go ahead and help someone else, and it goes on, instead of just 1,000 people at a component field all fighting to their death trying to get all mats. That's just not fun. In fact, I think it would be interesting if they actually took that that aspect of prototypes and actually made it so as vehicles, for example, maybe when a armored car is out, it requires a certain amount of iron to go ahead and make, and as more vehicles are unlocked, so the amount of iron that is required decreases for that vehicle to the point where it doesn't require any iron. Therefore, you can put out a bunch of different armored cars, but you can only put so many light tanks. So you would still see a good amount of lower level vehicles in the game because of it's easier to produce them. But you can still have the higher level vehicles there, but they would just be of a rare case in point, so you won't see them in huge numbers, I guess. But I don't know. That's kind of like my thoughts or so. This I thought this was gonna be 15 minutes. This is definitely a little bit longer, I guess. So I don't know. It's like a nice little discussion here. But let me know what you guys think. Just post your thoughts in the comments. So I always love reading through them. So this is a really good community. So I don't want to get any negative comments or so, any haters, I guess. So everyone's just so jolly to see themselves show up in the videos or to recount what battles or whatever situations they've come across in Foxhole. So, but let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Definitely, if you're new here and you like me ranting on it, so definitely subscribe to the channel. As I'm trying to, I definitely want to make this a weekly thing, so I won't be able to, in any capacity or so, spam up videos like I used to years ago. But I do want to go ahead and put out videos every week, and when you guys actually view the video, leave a like and subscribe, I can kind of gauge where I guess the video is or so in terms of what you guys actually want to watch or so, and etc, etc, etc. But anyway, enough of this discussion here or so, and I will catch you guys later.